Today we're going to go into the modeling toolkit, and this is, so last time we talked about how you can right click and get into your selection modes and manipulate the components on your object just as they exist, but we're going to go into ways that you can actually create and manipulate the object by like making your own geometry. There is an option under Mesh Tools called the Modeling Toolkit, Show Modeling Toolkit, and this is a sidebar that has a lot of really cool tools in it. So first off, instead of the right-click menu, I still use this, but there's some buttons over here that will let you access these component modes instead. So sometimes people think this is faster. So if you have your object selected, you can go into your selection mode. So here's edge mode and face mode. Okay, so let's start up at the top. Under the mesh tools, we have combine, separate, smooth, and Boolean. So combine, so this is one cube by itself, but if I duplicate it and move it over, I have two cubes. And what if I want to maybe like connect these together or do something like that? I have to combine them into one object. If I look here, I have cube 1 and cube 2, and I want to combine them into one. So I just select both of them and I hit combine, and notice these are now just empty, and there's p cube 3, which is the two of them combined together. So you can actually now work with this as one object. What if I'm like, oops, and I want to actually separate them again? I'll select the mesh. I'm just double clicking in face mode to select all of the faces of the section I want to separate. And I'll just select the section I want to separate and hit the separate button. And now it's back into two cubes again. So that's a really quick way about how you can combine and separate two mesh objects to each other. Smooth is kind of what it sounds like. It takes the current geometry and it smooths it out so that there's more to work with. So if I hit smooth, you can choose how many divisions, but it's basically like if you took a rock and you put it into the ocean for a really long time, it'll smooth it out. So like sea glass. Okay. Boolean is kind of a cool one. If I have one object and I put it on top of the other, I can select both of them together. If I hit Boolean, there's a couple different ways. So the first one is a union, so that's combining them together. But if I say difference, I can actually cut one out of the other. Or intersection, so wherever the two are touching, I can take that. So that's an interesting tool. We'll talk a little bit more later about why this shape is not ideal and how to work with proper geometry, but for now, feel free to use it. Great. So those are the mesh tools. I'm gonna delete this, delete these guys, and start with a new cube. All right, so extrude. This tool is so useful. You can extrude edges and faces. Let's start with a face. So I'm going to go to face mode, choose a face, hit extrude. And basically what this does is this lets you pull that face out. And the tool is really useful. It functions like all of the W, E, and R tools combined together. So it has, like you see, the move tool. It has the scale tool, so I can select this and actually scale it. You have to click on the cube to change it. So if I click on the arrow, it turns it back to the move tool. If I click on the little outer circle, it'll turn it to the rotation tool. In my options, I can choose my thickness. It'll change that for me. You can change how many divisions are in here. Very cool. Here's a hot tip on a keyboard shortcut. If I want to do the same thing more than one time, instead of clicking this and then going over here to the extrude tool, I can use a keyboard shortcut to just reactivate the last tool that I used, and that's G, and G as in George. And so the last tool I used was extrude, and I want to extrude again. So I hit this face and I hit G, and it just reactivates that last tool. So I can go ahead and here we go, I'm extruding again. Click over here, hit G, and I can pull it out. Very cool. So that is extrude. This is one of my favorite tools, and you will use it all the time. I'm going to delete this guy. New cube. The Bevel Tool is useful and problematic in that it works very well on simple shapes, but once you get more complex, sometimes it gets confused, so you should know how to create bevels on your own. So I will show both. If I want to create a bevel, basically that means to, let's see what it does, bevel. So notice how it took every edge and kind of softened it so it's at an angle instead of just a hard edge. So that's great, but how do we do that by ourselves? We just hit undo, which is the Z key, so ZZ a couple times. If I just bevel this one face, what does that look like? That looks like I just extruded it and then scaled it down a little bit. So I hit undo, let's bevel this ourselves. Extrude, up, scale, down. So if I have more complex geometry, sometimes I can bevel it just by myself and I won't run into any errors. So just know that the bevel tool is great, but it'll run you into problems sometimes. Okay, the bridge tool. So let's say I'm going to just delete this face just by selecting it and hitting the delete key. What if I have a hole like this and I want to bridge the gap between them? So I'm going to select the two edges that I want to bridge between, and I'm going to hit bridge. And I can choose how many divisions I want between them. But one thing you should know, you're like, oh great, this hole is filled. But let's actually take a closer look at this. If I move this face up, there's a hole in here. So the bridge tool is great, but just know that it will not connect the side edges. It just connects like across where you're bridging. Okay. Cool. Delete this. Start with a fresh cube. All right, multi-cut tool, another one of my favorite tools. Okay, so the multi-cut tool allows you to cut in your own custom edges however you want. And it's a little bit overwhelming at first. You're like, what is all of this? But basically it's telling you where it's going to make the connection. So I have to pick my starting point and my ending point. So I'm going to start over here on a corner, and it kind of snaps there for me, which is nice. And I can just cut across to the other side. Notice how it highlights, so I can cut here. So I can cut my diagonal line, hit enter when I'm done. And now here I have a fresh edge to work with. So I can make another cut diagonally across this way, and it makes this vertex for me. It knows that I need one there. So I just hit enter. And now if I go to vertex mode, nice. I have this little pyramid now. Very cool. Let's cut some more edges. Select my multi-cut tool. I don't have to start in a corner. I can start on an edge anywhere I want. I just click. I can click all the way around here. I can cut down all the way around here. I can finish the cut if it says close if I want to, but I don't have to. I can close it over here, hit enter. So I have this crazy edge now. Now, what if I want to, say, like merge these two vertices together? Sometimes you have an area and you're like, oh, I just really don't want that edge and I want to collapse it down. So there's a tool called the Target Weld tool. So I'm going to go into my vertex mode and say, okay, I want to weld these two vertices together. Select my Target Weld tool, and it's like, okay, where do you want to start? I'm going to start here. Weld this over here. So if you notice what that did is that took that first vertex and it stuck it on top of that other one, and now they're one vertex. So I can do the same thing here to there. Now it's all one vertex. I can weld this to here, no problem. So I'm kind of just getting rid of that edge that I made, but we're just playing, so that's good. Weld. So you just click on one vertex and you drag it onto the other one, and then they're stuck together. Very helpful. Target weld. Okay. So another tool that I like to use, let's go into a new cube, is similar to the multi-cut tool, but it really easily makes loops all the way around your object. And that's actually not over here, but it's under the Mesh Tools menu, and it's called the Insert Edge Loop tool. And this is another one of my top 5 tools, so please remember this one. So Insert Edge Loop tool. If you click the little box, it'll open up the tool settings. So let's go back over here. Tool settings. Okay, so you have a couple options here. You could say relative distance from edge, equal distance from edge, multiple edge loops. So the only 2 options I tend to use are the relative distance or multiple edge loops, and we'll look at what both of those mean. So relative distance. Okay, I can click and choose where I want this loop to be made. So if I want a little loop right over here on the edges, all right, so I can choose where I want that to be. Great, so I just click and it'll make a loop perpendicular to the edge that I clicked on. So notice I clicked on that vertical edge and it makes a horizontal loop. Multiple edge loops is similar, but you can make more than one loop at a time. So if I make 4, let's make in between these 2, 4 equally spaced edge loops perpendicular to where I clicked. So 4. I really like this tool. It's very useful. If I want to put an edge directly in the center, I can use the multiple edge loops, but only say 1, and I'll add 1 directly in the center. And I don't have to try and like guess where the middle is. So this is one of my favorites. So sometimes you want to create a polygon that is not a shape just like a cube or a sphere. You want to make a custom shape when you're starting off. And in order to do that, there's a really helpful tool called the Create Polygon tool. And basically what you do is you select this, and you can click to place vertices wherever you want. And you'll notice that there's a little tooltip that popped up there. So if I want to create maybe a V-shaped polygon, come down here, I'm clicking just on the grid, and I place all my vertices, and that looks good to me. I don't have to close it off. I don't have to click over here. I just hit enter when I finished, and it's made a really nice polygon for me. And using the extrude tool, like we saw before, I can click on my face, hit extrude, and if I pull, now I have this great shape. So this is a great starting point for something that's a little bit more custom than a cube. Now, I want to show you another one of my favorite tools used for filling in holes. So we saw the bridge tool, and we saw the weakness of the bridge tool, which is that it doesn't connect the sides of what you're bridging across. So if I'm going to delete this top face, and I have this hole here. And this is generally not good. You don't want to leave holes, you want to fill them in. You want to have like a complete geometry. So if I double click on one of the edges around my hole, it'll select all the way around, and there's kind of 2 ways I can fill this in. So one of them is this tool called the Fill Hole tool, and the best way to get to it is just hold down right click, and then there is this option called Fill Hole. Also, just really quick before we do that, notice Insert Edge Loop tool is here, the Bridge tool is here, the Multi-Cut is here, so you don't bevel. You don't actually have to go into the modeling toolkit to get all these. A lot of them will be in the shift and right click menu depending on what you have selected. So I encourage you to check out that menu, and we'll go into this more in class, but shift right click, very helpful. So fill hole. And ta-da! Just fills it right in for you. Very helpful. And it's great because it fills in all of the sides. so there's no holes on the edges left. Let's look at a different way to do this. I'm going to delete this face. Okay, here's a hole I need to fix. This one is my favorite way to do this. Under Mesh Tools, there's a tool called Append to Polygon. I'm going to click this. So click on a boundary edge and then click across. So basically, I click on one side and this like kind of crazy arrow interface pops up. So I'm clicking on one side and then I'm going to click across to the opposite side. And what that does is it fills in a four-sided polygon as best it can. And in this case, it's kind of easy because it's just a four-sided hole. But we hit enter and now it's done. Let's take a look at a more complex hole. So I'm going to delete this one again. In my object mode, Mesh Tools, Append to Polygon. So I want to go from one side across to the other side, and it fills in four-sided polygon. If I only want to fill in maybe a triangle over here, I'm going to hit G to reactivate my tool. Hit 1, and instead of going here, I'm going to go over here. And it can make a triangle for me. So I can hit enter, hit G again, click across, hit enter, and it's filling in the holes for me. Very helpful. So just to reiterate my favorite tools that you should know how to use. Number 1, extrude. If I extrude my entire object, it makes kind of a crazy thing, so don't do that. But just so you know, it's crazy. Okay, so number 1, extrude. Very helpful. Number 2, multi-cut. Cutting in my own edges. Super necessary. Especially when we get into more complex geometry and you're making like a human. This is really helpful for cutting in edges. Cool. Multi-cut, extrude. Insert edge loop tool. Under Mesh Tools, insert edge loop tool. I'm going to insert an edge. This guy, so good. Very helpful. Enter. Okay. Another one. Let's start with the new key. Oh no, I have a hole. How do I bridge across? The Append to Polygon tool. Mesh Tools, Append to Polygon, make a new polygon. So those are the 4 that I think you should know and practice, and experiment with the other ones as you go. But those are the 4 that I think are the most useful.